There's a silent lie you've been taught since childhood, that the more you give, the more you'll be valued. But in practice, the opposite happens. The more available you are, the more ordinary you become. The more you accept everything, the less respected you are. And maybe that hurts a little, because you've already tried to be the person who helps, who solves problems, who is always there. And even then, you didn't receive the recognition you expected. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. The world doesn't reward visible effort, it rewards perceived value. And value, most of the time, is born from scarcity. This is where an idea that few dare to apply comes in. You need to stop being so accessible. Not because you're better than others, but because if you don't define your value, someone else will define it for you, and usually at a low level. Machiavelli understood something most people prefer to ignore. People don't respect those who are always available. They respect those who have criteria, those who choose, those who don't give themselves away easily. It's better to be feared than loved. Not in the sense of causing fear, but of being taken seriously, because those who try to please everyone in the end are taken seriously by no one. And this isn't about becoming cold, distant, or arrogant. It's about understanding the game. Calculated use of force, appearance of virtue and fortuna working together. You don't need to do more. You need to stop offering yourself all the time, because what is rare attracts attention. What is difficult generates desire, and what is selective creates respect. And perhaps this is the turning point you never considered. It's not by increasing your effort that you change the game. It's by controlling your access. And here's the most uncomfortable part. This will require you to change your attitude. It will require you to say no, to remain silent at strategic moments, to endure the discomfort of not pleasing everyone, because deep down, you've been conditioned to seek approval. But approval doesn't build power, it builds dependence. And dependence is exactly what keeps you trapped, accepting less than you deserve. But there is another way. A way where you define your rules, control your availability, and gradually become someone who is not easily replaceable. Your own loyal armies begin to form when you stop trying to be accepted and start being respected. And the question that remains is not whether this works, it's whether you're ready to stop selling yourself cheaply and start being treated as someone who needs to be won over. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul. An invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder you are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. He begins to notice something curious. The more available he is, the less valued he becomes. It's like water, essential but too abundant to be fought over, but a diamond, rare, difficult to access, surrounded by barriers, and therefore desired. The logic is simple but uncomfortable. Value lies not in what he delivers, but in how accessible he allows himself to be. Machiavelli already pointed this out indirectly when he spoke about the appearance of virtue. It's not enough to be useful, one must appear selective. Someone who is always available responds too quickly, accepts everything, communicates without realizing it, that they can be replaced. And here comes a truth that few like to face. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. In the real world, people don't value what is easy. He may be extremely competent, dedicated, intelligent, but if he is always there, like running water, he loses the diamond's shine. And this has nothing to do with arrogance, but with perception. Virtù and fortuna go hand in hand. Skill without strategic positioning is lost in the noise. So, when he begins to reduce his availability, something changes. People start to notice his absence. They begin to wait for him, and little by little, they begin to value him. At work, this becomes even more evident. Imagine someone who solves everything, helps everyone, responds immediately to any message. Seems admirable, right? But over time, this person becomes the standard, and the standard is rarely recognized. Now think of someone who is less visible, but delivers with surgical precision. Someone who doesn't accept just any demand, who chooses where to put their energy. This second individual understands the calculated use of force. They don't wear themselves out unnecessarily. They focus on the points that really matter, the 20% that generate 80% of the impact. And more, they avoid being hated, but also don't seek to be loved all the time. They understand that being needed is more powerful than being liked. And this completely changes the dynamic, especially because decisions based on real human nature show that people respect limits more than excessive efforts. A practical example? Stop responding to everything immediately. Wait. Create a small strategic delay. This already changes the perception. It's not about ignoring, it's about positioning yourself. After all, those who respond to everything right away seem to have nothing more important to do. In relationships, the logic repeats itself, and perhaps even more intensely. The person who is always available, always agreeing, always present, begins to be seen as a sure thing, and what is guaranteed loses tension, loses value, loses desire. Here enters one of the most misinterpreted ideas. It's better to be feared than loved, not in the literal sense of causing fear, but of being respected to the point of not being neglected. He learns that saying yes all the time doesn't build connection, it builds wear and tear. And without realizing it, he begins to live to meet external expectations, abandoning his own essence. Constant adaptability doesn't mean submission, but emotional intelligence to know when to advance and when to retreat. And little by little, he realizes he doesn't need to do more. He needs to be less available, because value isn't in visible effort, but in perceived scarcity. And that's exactly where a new silent question arises. If being too accessible reduces your value, what happens when you start creating subtle barriers? He begins to understand that it's not just about being less available. It's about creating criteria, not random barriers, but conscious filters. This is where the so-called velvet rope effect comes in. The same one from the most exclusive places where not everyone gets in, even if they have money. The question changes completely. It's no longer how to please more people, but who really deserves access. And that changes everything. Because when barriers exist, the perception of value automatically arises. Machiavelli already spoke about the appearance of virtue and access control as tools of power. Those who enter too easily are not valued. Those who need to go through some level of selection are seen as special. This happens because the human brain is programmed to value what is difficult. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. It's not pretty, it's not romantic, but it's real. What requires effort, attention, and criteria activates a deep psychological mechanism, desire. And that's why people, opportunities, and even relationships follow this invisible logic. When he creates criteria, he ceases to be accessible by default and becomes accessible by choice. At work, this can be applied in an extremely strategic way. He no longer needs to accept every meeting, every task, every request. On the contrary, he begins to select where he gets involved. A practical example: instead of automatically answering yes, he starts asking, What is the impact of this? This automatically filters out what really matters. He also begins to establish clear limits, defined schedules, well-structured priorities, less availability for irrelevant tasks. This is not negligence. It's the calculated use of force. And curiously, the less he makes himself available, the more people begin to value his time. Because now there is scarcity, and scarcity generates respect. He ceases to be seen as an infinite resource and begins to be perceived as a strategic asset. Virtù and fortuna, once again, go hand in hand, skill with positioning. And here comes a powerful detail. He doesn't need to over-explain his limits. The more he justifies, the more power he loses. Silently, he simply applies, and that communicates more than 1,000 words. In relationships, the effect is even more intense. When he's always available, always present, always accessible, there's no tension, and without tension, there's no perceived value. But when he starts to have his own life, his own interests, his own priorities, something changes. He's no longer there all the time, and that generates curiosity. He becomes someone with criteria, not someone who accepts just anything. This automatically activates respect. And here comes one of the most strategic ideas. Avoid being hated, but also don't seek constant approval. He learns to say no without guilt, not to respond immediately, not to constantly mold himself. And this creates a completely different dynamic, because now he's not trying to be accepted. He's deciding who gets in, and that changes the game. His own loyal armies begin to form, people who truly value his presence, not just his availability. And deep down, he begins to realize something unsettling. If creating barriers increases value, then perhaps true power lies in knowing when to open, and especially when to close. He begins to realize that the real turning point lies not only in creating barriers, but in sustaining those barriers. And this requires a skill that most avoid, saying no. It seems simple, but it isn't. Because each automatic yes carries an invisible message, that his time is available, that his energy is free, that his presence can be accessed at any time. And in essence, this corrodes the value he has been trying to build. Machiavelli already understood that decisions based on real human nature require firmness, not constant appeasement. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the means is strategic refusal. He begins to realize that saying no doesn't drive away the right people. It only reveals who was there for convenience. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. It's not about being rude, but about being clear. Because whoever accepts everything ends up being seen as someone without criteria. And criteria is what defines value. When he says no, he is not rejecting the other. He is choosing himself. In the workplace, this transforms into a powerful tool. He ceases to be the universal problem solver and becomes a strategic individual. A practical example, when a new demand arises, he doesn't immediately respond with a sure, no problem. He pauses. He evaluates. He asks, is this aligned with my priorities? If not, he elegantly declines. I can't take on this right now with the quality I'd like. Simple, direct, without excessive explanation. This is the calculated use of force. And the effect is immediate. People begin to respect his time more, because now he's not available by default. He chooses where he comes in. Virtù and fortuna meet once again. The ability to say no plus firm positioning. And here's an important detail. He doesn't need to harden his communication, but he does need to harden his decision. Because being kind doesn't mean being permissive. And interestingly, the more consciously he says no, the more real weight his yes answers carry. In relationships, the impact is even deeper. How many times has he said yes just to avoid conflict? How many times has he accepted something he didn't want just to avoid displeasing someone? And in the end, what did that generate? Exhaustion, resentment, loss of respect. The body feels it, literally. The forced yes activates biological stress, creates internal tension, and erodes identity. And little by little, he ceases to be who he is to become who others expect him to be. Better to be feared than loved. Here it takes on another meaning, being respected to the point of not being pressured. He begins to understand that saying no is an act of identity. It's saying, "That's not me," and that changes everything. He begins to position himself more clearly without the need for confrontation, without the need for long explanations. Just firmness. Constant adaptability doesn't mean always giving in, but knowing when to maintain a position. And in the midst of all this, he notices something silent. The less he speaks to justify his limits, the more powerful his stance becomes. And perhaps that's exactly where a new weapon begins to emerge, not in words, but in their absence. He begins to notice something almost disconcerting. The less he speaks, the more he is heard. It seems counterintuitive, but it makes perfect sense when you observe real human nature. Most people talk too much, explain too much, try to justify themselves all the time, and in doing so, dilute their own authority. Silence, on the other hand, creates space, it creates tension, it creates presence. Machiavelli, even without using these words, already indicated the importance of the appearance of virtue and control of the narrative, and whoever speaks less controls more. Because whoever reveals everything loses room for maneuver. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. In the real world, mystery generates value, and silence is the most sophisticated way to create this mystery. It's not an absence of content, it's a strategic choice. It's deciding when to speak and, especially, when not to speak. He begins to understand that not every opinion needs to be expressed, nor does every provocation deserve a response. And this completely changes his energy, because now he is not reacting, he is observing. At work, this becomes an absurd competitive advantage. While many try to prove themselves in every meeting, he observes, he listens more than he speaks, and when he speaks, it's precise, direct, surgical. This is the calculated use of force. A practical example. In a heated discussion, instead of engaging in the confrontation, he remains silent for a few seconds. This small space breaks the emotional rhythm of the environment, and when he finally speaks, everyone pays attention, because they are not used to it. And more, silence also prevents mistakes. How many bad decisions are born from impulsive responses? He learns to wait, to let the other person speak more, because those who talk too much reveal more than they should, and those who listen gather information. Your own loyal armies are not built only with action, but with strategic intelligence. And silence is one of the most elegant ways to exercise power without apparent effort. He doesn't need to raise his voice. He doesn't need to impose himself aggressively. His presence already communicates. In relationships, silence has an even more profound effect. He begins to realize that many arguments only exist because someone insists on responding. When he removes the fuel, that is, the reaction, the conflict loses strength. It's not escape, it's emotional mastery. Better to be feared than loved here takes on a new meaning, being respected to the point of not being provoked all the time. He doesn't engage in every debate, doesn't respond to every provocation, doesn't over-justify himself. And this generates something powerful, space for the other to reveal themselves, for emotions to calm down, for the dynamic to change. And more, silence also communicates value. Those who don't need to talk all the time demonstrate security. Constant adaptability isn't about reacting to everything, but about choosing where to invest your energy. And in the midst of this new behavior, he perceives something almost invisible. It's not just what he says that defines his position, but the time he takes to respond. Because perhaps true power lies not only in silence, but in controlling the moment he decides to break it. He begins to realize that all of this, scarcity, barriers, silence, only works if there's something sustaining it from within. Emotional control. Because it's no use speaking less if he reacts impulsively. It's no use saying no if he gives in to the first pressure. And this is where most fail. The emotion comes quickly, intensely, almost automatically. The so-called amygdala hijack happens in seconds. And if he's not attentive, he reacts before thinking. But there's a small window, about 6 seconds. If he holds on to that moment, he regains control. It seems like little, but it changes everything. Machiavelli already understood this when talking about decisions based on real human nature. Whoever controls themselves controls the game. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. It's not about not feeling, it's about not being dominated by what you feel. He begins to act like a rock, while the surrounding environment is waves. The waves crash, make noise, try to destabilize, but the rock remains, and this silently elevates his status. At work, this mastery translates into a strategic advantage. Imagine a high-pressure situation. Someone raises their voice, demands something aggressively, tries to provoke. The common reaction would be to respond in kind. But not him. He pauses. He breathes. He waits a few seconds before speaking. This small pause already changes the dynamic. Because now he's not reacting, he's choosing. This is the calculated use of force. A practical example. Upon receiving unexpected criticism, instead of immediately defending himself, he calmly replies, "I understand your point. I will analyze this more carefully." That's all. No lengthy justification, no counterattack, and the effect is immediate. He conveys control, maturity, authority. Virtù and fortuna, once again, go hand in hand. Because it's not enough to be competent, one must appear unshakable. And the less he reacts, the more others realize they can't control him emotionally. And whoever cannot be controlled naturally gains respect. In relationships, this principle is even more powerful. Often conflict doesn't arise from the problem itself, but from the reaction to the problem. The other person begins to realize they don't need to respond to everything immediately, that they don't need to resolve everything right away. That time, when used well, works in their favor. Delaying a response isn't disinterest, it's positioning. It's showing that they have other priorities, other demands, another life beyond that interaction. Better to be feared than loved here means being respected emotionally, not being someone who reacts to every stimulus. They cease to be predictable. And this completely changes the dynamic. Constant adaptability comes into play. They don't always react the same way. They choose when and how to respond. And little by little, something begins to become clear. When they control their emotions, they not only avoid unnecessary conflicts, they redefine the game, because whoever remains calm dictates the pace, and whoever dictates the pace begins to realize that perhaps true power lies not in staying, but in knowing they can leave at any moment. He begins to realize a truth that completely changes his stance. Power isn't about convincing, it's about being able to leave. As long as he needs to stay, negotiate, please, maintain, he's at a disadvantage. But the moment he knows he can leave, everything changes. This has a name, Bhatna, best alternative to a negotiated agreement, or translating it into stark reality, having real options. Machiavelli already made it clear, albeit indirectly, that those who are dependent lose power. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. No matter how competent, dedicated, or necessary he is, if he has no alternatives, he's trapped. And those who are trapped negotiate poorly, they accept less, they tolerate more, and they adapt to whatever comes their way. Now, when he builds alternatives, financial, professional, emotional, he changes his position. He ceases to be a hostage and becomes an invitee. And this completely alters the behavior of the people around him, because they realize he doesn't need to be there. At work, this is brutally clear. Imagine two scenarios. In the first, he is totally dependent on that job. In the second, he has other sources of income, other opportunities, other doors open. The behavior changes completely. In the first, he accepts pressure, excessive demands, veiled disrespect. In the second, he chooses. He negotiates better. He takes a stand. He doesn't need to say yes to everything. This is the calculated use of force. A practical example? Starting to build a parallel income, whether with freelance work, investments, or even a digital project. Reading books like Think and Grow Rich or studying online income generation strategies already changes the mental game, because now he is no longer limited. Virtu and fortuna come into play, skill plus opportunity. And little by little, he realizes that the more alternatives he has, the less he needs to use direct force, because his mere presence already carries power. He doesn't threaten to leave. He just knows he can. In relationships, this dynamic is even more sensitive. When he is emotionally dependent, he accepts more than he should. He tolerates behaviors that don't respect his essence. He stays out of fear of losing. And this creates a position of invisible weakness. But when he has his own identity, when his life doesn't revolve around the other person, something changes. He doesn't beg. He doesn't insist. He doesn't diminish himself. He chooses to stay, and that's completely different from needing to stay. Better to be feared than loved here means being respected to the point of not being taken for granted. He understands that love is not dependence, it's a conscious choice. And this changes his energy, his posture, his communication. Constant adaptability comes into play again. He adjusts, but he doesn't lose himself. And silently, he realizes something that few understand. The greatest power is not in remaining, but in knowing that, if necessary, he gets up, gives thanks, and leaves. And it is precisely this freedom that begins to directly reflect in how he positions himself in the world, including in the environment where he spends most of his time. Work. He begins to look at the work environment with different eyes and notices a pattern that previously seemed invisible. The most overworked people are not the most valued, they are the most available. And that changes everything, because he understands that it's not about doing more, it's about doing better and showing up at the right moment. Machiavelli already indicated that the appearance of virtue is often worth more than invisible effort. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. In the corporate world, those who solve everything behind the scenes rarely receive proportional credit. So he changes his strategy. Instead of trying to be indispensable in everything, he chooses to be relevant in key areas. He begins to identify the 20% of actions that generate 80% of the recognition, and he focuses there. This is the calculated use of force. He stops being the do-it-all and becomes the solve what matters. And curiously, the less he is distracted, the more his presence gains weight. In practice, this requires some simple but powerful changes. He stops responding immediately to everything. He starts organizing his deliverables better, creating moments of impact instead of constant presence. A clear example, instead of sending small updates all the time, he delivers something more complete, more structured, at strategic moments. This generates a perception of value. He also learns to say, "This is not a priority for me right now," elegantly, without conflict, and this filters what truly deserves his attention. His own loyal armies begin to emerge here as well. People who respect his way of working, who understand his position. He ceases to be seen as a resource and begins to be seen as a key player. Virtù and Fortuna align again, and more. He understands that being busy is not the same as being productive, so he reduces noise, fewer unnecessary meetings, fewer tasks without impact, less availability for what doesn't add value. And this creates something rare: focus. And in the midst of this transformation, he begins to notice an almost silent effect. The less he appears, the more his presence is perceived. Because now there is absence, there is a gap, there is expectation. He is not everywhere at all times, and this means that when he does appear, he is noticed. Better to be feared than loved here translates into professional respect, not being someone ignored nor overburdened, but someone who is valued. He doesn't need to raise his voice, he doesn't need to impose himself aggressively. His stance speaks for itself. Constant adaptability remains present. He observes the environment, understands the game, adjusts his performance, but without losing his essence, and little by little he perceives something even deeper. If at work he can already control his availability, perhaps the real challenge lies in applying this where emotions are more intense, within his own family. He realizes that applying all of this at work is challenging, but within the family, it's another level, because there are no clear contracts, defined goals, or formal hierarchies. There are emotions, stories, unspoken expectations, and that's precisely why most fail. He begins to understand that without a firm stance, the pattern repeats itself. He becomes the available one, the one who gives in, the one who solves problems, the one who absorbs. And this, over time, wears him down. Machiavelli already showed that decisions based on real human nature require clear boundaries, even in sensitive environments. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. Love doesn't eliminate the need for structure. On the contrary, without limits, respect dissolves. And here comes an important change. He stops defining limits through emotion and starts defining them through behavior. It's not about arguing, explaining, convincing. It's about acting differently. Because repeated behavior teaches more than any speech. In practice, this means small changes that generate big effects. For example, he stops responding immediately to all family demands, not out of disinterest, but as a matter of positioning. He creates his own space, schedules, priorities, moments just for himself. If before he would drop everything to fulfill any request, now he evaluates. This is a calculated use of force. Another example. Instead of engaging in long arguments to defend himself, he uses silence. He doesn't react, doesn't over-justify, doesn't fuel the conflict. This removes energy from the situation, and little by little, the pattern changes. Because people begin to realize that he doesn't respond in the same way as before. His own loyal armies here translate into more balanced relationships based on respect, not dependence. Virtù and Fortuna remain present. Emotional skill plus positioning. And he understands that being present is not about being available all the time. It's about being fully present when he chooses to be. And in the midst of this process, something begins to reorganize internally. He stops seeing himself only as a son, brother, partner, and begins to see himself as an individual, with his own identity, with criteria, with limits. Better to be feared than loved here takes on a profound meaning. Being respected within one's own home. Not by imposition, but by consistency. He doesn't change the other, he changes himself. Constant adaptability comes into play again. He adjusts his posture, observes the reactions, maintains what works. And silently, the surrounding environment begins to adapt to him. Because when someone changes their internal frequency, everything around them responds. And it is at this point that he realizes something that closes the whole cycle. Perhaps it was never about controlling the external world, but about becoming the center of his own gravity. Now let me ask you a direct question. Looking at everything you've seen so far, are you truly being valued, or are you just being used because of your availability? Because there's a huge difference between being needed and being replaceable. And most of the time, that line is defined by you, not by others. If you keep saying yes to everything, if you keep reacting to any stimulus, if you remain available all the time, then, without realizing it, you're training the world to treat you as something commonplace. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. The world responds to the behavior you repeat, not the intention you carry. And perhaps that's the most uncomfortable truth of all. You're not being devalued. You're allowing yourself to be. Now think about it. What would happen if, starting today, you began to change small things? If you took a little longer to respond? If you chose better where to put your energy? If you said no when necessary and stood by that no? It doesn't have to be a radical transformation. It starts small, but it starts consciously. Calculated use of strength, constant adaptability, virtù and fortuna working in your favor. Because, in the end, it's not about manipulating others. It's about stopping sabotaging yourself. Better to be feared than loved, in the sense of being respected enough not to be ignored. And that doesn't come from excessive effort. It comes from positioning. So tell me, are you going to continue being water, or are you going to start behaving like a diamond? And now I want to really challenge you. When was the last time you said no to something that didn't make sense to you? When was the last time you chose yourself, even knowing that someone might not like it? Comment below, because this isn't just reflection, it's a decision. And if this content brought you any clarity, even if it bothered you, then you've already taken the first step. But it doesn't stop here. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, because this is just the beginning. There's much more about Machiavelli, human behavior, and real strategy coming soon. And next time, maybe we'll go even deeper.